Hello, everyone. Welcome to our YouTube. I am Dr. Alicia with Coaching with Dr. Alicia, and today I am going to do a lecture on young adulthood. And anybody who's 18 and over, you know what young adulthood is like. And so today I am doing a lecture for a course and with the master's students, and you guys who are master students will have access to the course. Everybody today who's looking at on YouTube, you won't have access to this video. You have to be a student. So hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. And today we're talking about young adulthood, and I have a group of students in here in my human behavior class. I'm recording this for educational purposes. So these are all students who are getting their MSW degree. They're going to be therapists and they're going to be community workers. So let's get started. I want to talk about young adulthood, and the age of young adulthood is basically everybody in, I think we can safely say young adulthood is the first, let's just say it's like almost the first half of your adult life, right? So young adulthood would be, let's see, as in when you're 18 years old, you are an adult legally. So maybe up until when you're about 40 years old, I think that makes sense. That's young adulthood. So anybody who's here today, who is, let me open up the comments. Anybody who's here today, who is in the age of 18 and 40? Say who you are. Say something in the chat. If you're between the ages of 18 and 40, this is you guys. We're going to talk about all of the things that you are experiencing currently right now, 18 and 40. And people who are over 40, you're in that middle adult age like myself. And we're going to be thinking back and reflecting on, oh gosh, yeah, I had to go through that and I had to experience all of those things. So that's what we're talking about. The last time I was here, the last time I gave a lecture, I talked about attachment and parenting and identity and attachment. I talked about a lot of the early stages of attachment. And I think for today, much of what you experience when you're 18 is usually the age, depending on your culture, where you venture off and you go off and you start to figure out who you are without your parents around, right? Many of us go to college. Some of us don't. Some of us take up a trade, and some of us do a variety of different things. But a lot of how we are in our adulthood is, believe it or not, it really has to do a lot with what's happened to us in our early childhood. I'm a couples therapist, and a lot of what I deal with and sort through with the couples that I work with, many times I'm asking questions like, how is this reminiscent of things that happened to you when you were younger? Tell a story about what comes up for you. And you will get a story. Yeah, well, when I was 12 years old, I always felt self-conscious because I was teased in this way. Or I have this thing with abandonment with my current spouse, but now that I think about it, it's reminiscent of sometimes I thought that my mother would pick me up from school and she didn't, and I had to walk home and I was wondering where she was. So a lot of our current things and issues that we have in establishing and maintaining relationships and sorting things out has a lot to do with your foundation. And so your foundation is your family of origin. Family of origin work is something that I think all of us need to reflect on, particularly social workers who want to help other people sort through their issues, you kind of have to be able to reflect and sort through your own issues. Now, I want to say that there's no such thing as a perfect childhood. There's no such thing as a perfect relationship. There's no such thing as a perfect nothing. So we need to take that out of our head and not point the finger and say, what's wrong with you? We have to be able to look at these experiences that we've had in the past and say, okay, so given these experiences, how is this affecting me now? And how do I renegotiate my relationships, my work relationships, all of your types of relationships, considering some of the things that you've gone through early on. So a good quote would be, all for young adulthood. So if I were to give a young adulthood a category or a quote, that would be, all that has gone before can be seen as preparation. So that's a statement that really kind of solidifies people's functioning as a first-time adult, because you've never been an adult before. But the first time you're an adult, a lot of how you are able to make all of these transitions into adulthood says all that's gone before can be seen as preparation. Yes, preparation. And all that follows can be viewed as actualization, right? So what that tells us is that how we're up, all of the things that happens to us from the time that we're younger into the time you become an adult, whether you launch. There are some people who don't get to launch. There are people who who basically stay at home with their parents, but they also go to college. So there you go. I mean, we talked about in class, I know Journey was talking about this in class about how she is in graduate school and she's an adult and she pays her bills and does all these things, but at the same time, she lives with her parents. And so she, needs them, but she has some sense of independence. And I think that's what's happened. This is normal in terms of young adulthood. Okay. So that's what I want to talk about to kind of lead us into it, is the fact that you're sorting through all of these things by yourself. And I see a comment in here, the type of therapy is suitable for financial trauma. Yeah. I mean, think about how you grew up. What if you grew up and your parents or your mother or whatever reason couldn't pay the light bill? And then, you wake up in the morning, you're like, why is it cold in here? Why won't the lights cut on? Oh, Lord, they didn't cut the lights out. How does that affect your relationship with money in the future? Yeah, that makes sense. Suitable for financial trauma. That could have been traumatizing. And I just want to say, just because something like that happened to you doesn't mean that you were traumatized. Only time it gets into the category of trauma is if you did not have someone in your life to help you process that. So if you had a mother or a father or an aunt who said, God, that must have been really awful, who gave you space to share how you felt about an unfortunate experience, that's not necessarily trauma. That's just an experience. So I think trauma is not bad things that happen to you. Trauma basically is when things happen to you, anything, and you don't have a place to process it. So I just wanted to make that caveat there. So, okay, so I'm done talking about that, but I do want to talk a little bit about that transition from who and what you're going to be as a young adult based on your parenting. So I want to talk a little bit about parenting. And okay, so there's a bunch of different ways in which we are parented as children. And it does have an effect on how you are as an older adult and how you're able to function. Because remember, when you become an adult, you are figuring out who you are. And to figure out who you are, you have to maintain some sense of identity. So in order for you to have this identity that's very common, like all of us go through an identity crisis. I've gone through it. Sometimes I go through it like, who am I really? What is it? All of us are questioning and thinking about who you are. So part of it is related to parenting. So there are 4 styles of parenting. One style of a parenting is authoritative. So authoritative is a style of parenting where your parents were affectionate and they were engaged. When you came home from school, they wanted to know, who'd you sit with at lunch? Did anybody bother you on the bus? They talked to you, they engaged you, they wanted to know what was going on with you, and you got a lot of hugs and kisses, right? But it wasn't just hugs and kisses. They set limits. They said, okay, it's Friday night and you want to go out with your friends, you need to be back by 9 p.m. is your curfew. And if you don't, there's consequences. So authoritative parenting is nurturing, it's warm, but it's also giving you consequences. And I know this is cultural, but some of it is reasoning with your child in terms of consequences, using logic and appropriate negotiation. Sometimes it's having, and depending on how you were raised, some people think that children should not have a voice. Like, I'm going to tell you what to do. But authoritative parents, they don't let their children run things, but they do get their children's input. And so they empower the child to make their own decisions. And just think about that. As an adult, you also want to be empowered to make your own decisions. I don't want my children dependent on me. I want them to be able to make their own decisions. And I know when I talked to my son just last night, he was like, Mom, what should I do? And I said, you got the answers within you. You don't need me to have to tell you what to do. You already know what to do. And he said, what if it's wrong? I said, it could be wrong, but it's a lesson learned. So I'm trying to be authoritative with him instead of telling him what to do. Now, authoritarian parenting is where parents are saying, I don't care what you say. You do what I say. But why? Because I said so. And I don't want to hear it. You either do it or you don't do it. Use it. Typically, if they misbehave, there's not going to be no consequences, and we're not going to sit down and have a conversation about it. You're going to use physical punishment and maybe even verbal insults. And this is sort of like dismissing a child's feelings. Parenting that is authoritarian can also be very distant. Could say, you know what, this is my child. This is not my friend. I am just, don't talk to me. Who had authoritarian parents? Who had authoritarian parents? Society has influenced a yes or no. Yeah, that's a good comment. Society has influenced this sort of way of being. Okay, hello, Dr. Vive. How you doing? Another way of a parenting style is this lenient parenting style. Oh my goodness. These are people who are very affectionate and very indulgent, but they're very anxious to please their child. They don't get their children's input. They have their children dictate what happens in the household. They don't say no to their children, and they don't put boundaries on anything, and they allow themselves to be manipulated by their children. And they know they're being manipulated, but they just don't put limits, and there are no consequences with lenient parenting. Neglectful parenting but lenient parents are very affectionate. So these types of parents hug. They be hugging their parents, and they hug their children, and they give them lots of love, but they give them no boundaries. Neglect parenting, there's no hugs, there's no boundaries, there's no nothing. They are removed emotionally. And sometimes it could be because of substance abuse. And I know we as social workers, we're assessing this. Like, let's see. Last time I used to work in child welfare. Last time I worked in child welfare, 15% of the children that came into the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, 15% of the children that came into DCFS came into our care at the time because of abuse. But 85% of the children that came into services was because of neglect, not doing for the child that should have been done for them. And I think this is important for social workers to think about this when you're with clients, because neglect is also a form of trauma. It's not just these things happened and these things happened to me. My parent hit me, and they think if your parents hit you or yelled at you or abused you at any time, physically or verbally, that's the only thing that comprises abuse or trauma. No, it's the neglect portion. Because sometimes, I ain't gonna lie, sometimes my kids get on my nerves and I yell. I yell at them, I'd be like, what the, and I know their feelings are hurt, but I go back and I say, I'm really sorry. Things got out of hand. You was getting on my nerves. I can't believe I told you to do this. I don't know how many times. So I go back and I try to repair, because there's no perfect parent. And even me as a social worker and a therapist, I know better. I do try to go back and I try to nurture, and I do try to give them nurture, and I apologize. Well, neglectful parents, they never tune into their child. They don't give them a lot of hugs, and they're not very consistent. And they don't discipline at all. They don't, these are people like, where's your home training? You ain't got no home training. These are parents who have neglected them in some way. And usually it's because of substance abuse or parents, people who were raised by a parent who loves them deeply, but they're struggling with a mental health issue, severe mental health issue. And sometimes those are reasons why children don't get what they would get. Usually that's what you find with neglectful parents. Okay, so in case you haven't put this together in your head, parenting comes from giving guidance, but also giving guidance and boundaries, but also giving warmth, right? Being warm to your children, loving, affectionate with your children, but at the same time putting limits. So authoritative parenting, it's when a child tends to be, when they grow up, when they're older, the authoritative style where parents gave them guidance, but they also gave them love, that child will tend to be more responsible, happy. They grow up to be confident. They are cooperative, and they're really good students and tend to be leaders. That authoritarian. So giving love and affection to your child and also having limits creates happy children, because children want limits, right? They need that. They feel comfortable when they have limits. Authoritarian, people who grew up with authoritarian, which is do as I say, I ain't giving you no hugs, lots and lots of guidance, but no warmth. These children tend to be very moody. They tend to be very anxious, but they are well behaved. And they're average to a good student, but these students are followers because they don't trust themselves. Authoritarian tend to be followers. They're not going to be the type of children who are going to say, who are just going to follow the leader. They're going to follow. They're not going to be leaders, but they tend to be a follower. Now, this is not my opinion. This is data. So everything that I'm going to give, everything I'm going to talk about today is not an opinion of me. This ain't the world according to Alicia. This is evidence-based stuff I'm giving you today. So just to let you know, well, now and thinking about exceptions, no. Now, lenient parents, where all they are is giving high warmth, but they don't give no guidance. These are very angry children. Lenient parents who are grow up to be, they are not very empathetic, believe it or not, have issues with empathetic. They are a follower. They're not, they don't feel confident in themselves. And these children tend to be demanding, whiny, and easily frustrated, just very angry children. They did not get the safety, because giving children guidance gives them safety. Neglectful children are clingy. And they do get in trouble, and they are, it's almost like they want attention and they want affection and they aren't able to get it. So that's what we find with parenting children who grew up with very neglectful parenting. They are just asking to be seen and heard. And a lot of times they do this in a way where they're just acting out, sometimes in a negative way, because they want that guidance and love and attention. And we could see how this can have an effect on when you become an adult. Right? When you first become an adult and you leave home, you're leaving with you all of these parenting styles. How does this affect identity? Here's the definition of identity. It has to be a crisis. You have to have a sense of what you want out of life. How are you going to know what you want out of life? A lot of it depends on when you get older and when you have this identity crisis, particularly like late adolescent, early adulthood, when you're trying on these different roles, it has to be some sort of crisis. You're going to have a difficult time resolving a lot of these things and making a commitment to figure out who and what you are, depending on your parents. And I think what's so fascinating about this whole thing is, I don't know if y'all know this, but I love watching people who grew up in cults. It's like a thing I have about it. It's like, do y'all, okay, people in the class, do y'all do this? Do y'all watch these documentaries about people who grew up in cults where everything they were told what to do, how to do it. They were given instructions. They were not allowed to explore the world. And it was very authoritarian in that sense, where there's no negotiation with children. This is how it's going to be. What's fascinating is that when they grow up, they're totally lost and they leave this kind of cultish sort of, I'm thinking about, it's not all Mormons, because I think that's not fair to put that on them, but certain sectors of Mormonism, just look at Netflix documentaries about Mormonism. You look at these Netflix documentaries and stuff, and you're like, there are people, you start to see how it has an effect on them, and they have a very difficult time later on figuring out who and what they are. They are forced to get married. As soon as they turn 18, they're suggested on getting married. I can't imagine getting married early on like that and not even knowing who you are. And here you have to be a wife and a mom, a lot of them. And also, not all Jehovah Witnesses, because I know a lot of Jehovah Witnesses that are pretty awesome people, but there's certain group in there where they can be really judgmental and really hard on people, and they would dismiss people quickly. So I'm talking about really restrictive religious environments can also make it so that people have a really difficult time trying to figure out who and what they are, because they were never given a voice. And, it's very difficult. So what y'all saying? David Koresh. Yes, there's a good one. David Koresh. I'm asking about how the parent's parenting style impacts the child when they are a child and when they are an adult. Does that make sense? Yeah. I mean, can you imagine children having children? It's really difficult. It's hard to parent when you're not quite certain who you are. You're trying to figure all this stuff out, and then you're put into this mom role. I think that's what you're saying. Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I had my first child when I was almost 30, and that was hard, almost 30. My clock was running out. I couldn't imagine young teenage mothers going through some of that, but hats off, they did it, All right, good point. So there's all these types of identities that late adolescence, and even when you're 18 and you're in that young adult stage, this is where you're figuring it out. And you do have an identity crisis. And coming out of that, some of us, it's concluded. Experiencing crisis has been included. And so that means your identity has been achieved, right? So that's what identity achieved means. You're making a commitment to who and what you are, and you feel comfortable with that. Moratorium is a type of identity resolution coming out of adolescence and going into young adulthood. You've experienced a crisis, but you're not really haven't figured it out yet. A lot of us are in that moratorium. You're still trying to like make sense of what's going on. You haven't made a commitment. You're struggling with making a commitment with who you are. And people who are still in that, I don't know who I am, I'm trying to figure it out, it increases anxiety. You start to feel really anxious and depressed because you have not quite figured out who and what you are, what you want out of life. If y'all know people who are 30 years old and still trying to figure out what they want out of life, they haven't quite committed. They don't know, they're struggling financially and they haven't quite made this commitment because they're still figuring it out. Foreclosure is where you don't experience a crisis. You therefore take on the characteristics of your parents. Your values, you haven't explored, you weren't allowed to explore personal exploration. You just want to take on the values and beliefs of your parents. Now, that's when I talked about the cult. People who were raised in cultish, like very high structure settings, they are in more of a foreclosure type of identity going into adulthood because they don't know who and what they are, because they just have to take on what their parents are. And I say, well, that's what your mom thinks, but what do you think? You know what I mean? I try to get them to question things. Yes, I do, as a therapist. When I get them in my office, try to get them to question, because that's normal. It's normal part of identity. Identity diffused. These are people who are like feathers floating in the ring. They don't know who and what they are. There's no commitment to anything. They don't have any, you don't know what their personal values are. They didn't have any guidance. They're not exploring anything. They just do whatever and be whatever. And whatever they overhear somebody saying, oh yeah, I'd like to be part of that. And then they go there, but it never really works out. These are people, it just don't even work out for them. You know, they start projects, they never finish it. They start college, but they don't finish it because they couldn't pick a major. They couldn't figure out what's going on. Maybe I'll go to a trade school, but I don't know about that. Oh, a friend of mine told me about this job working here. Maybe I'll go and do that. It's directed by external and not necessarily internal. That is it. So would you believe that the type of identity you have is seen, in a lot of ways, the type of parenting style. So in case you didn't know, lenient parenting style is highly associated with the moratorium type of identity, right? These people are all areas of their life. They're going into adulthood. They want to achieve this sense of identity. They know that they want to have an identity, but they did not have the structure and did not have a way for them to like really safely explore these things. So they are unable to achieve a certain identity. They're not quite certain what they want to do. They're definitely in the middle of this crisis. Authoritative parenting is mostly associated with an achieved identity. Have y'all run into people who are 25 years old and they're like, oh, I know what I want to do. I want to get married. I want to do this. I want to have children here. Oh, and I want to live at this part of the country. And I know I want to be a doctor. I'm going to medical school, or I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to law school. I want to go to this school. They know exactly what they want to do, who they want to be, what they want to become. Individuals like that are highly associated with authoritative parenting. That's lots of guidance and lots of warmth. So all y'all parents in here, keep this in mind. This is the best, the most ideal, is giving your children lots of warmth and care, but also giving them lots of boundaries and consequences for their behavior. Okay, neglectful parenting is associated with diffuse type of identity. The child is just lost as an adult. They don't know what they want to do. They are really having this identity crisis, and they are just feathers floating in the wind. They were neglected. They can't figure things out. So that's the type of parenting that they have. That's the type of young adult that they start to become, they don't have any direction at all. And so, as a social worker, you got to start working with them to try to figure out who and what they are. Authoritarian parents, where parents they give you lots of structure, but no warmth, no place to connect with somebody. That's associated with this child's point of view being the same as their parents' point of view. I mean, it's healthy for your children to allow your children to be its own person and to have their own thoughts apart from you as a parent. They have to be able to go out and explore and figure out who and what they are. Okay. I'm going to pause here. Any questions? Any questions from the class? What did y'all notice? How y'all feel listening to this?
I think it makes sense.
How so?
I was just reflecting on my own upbringing and like my parents' parenting styles. I would say my parents' parenting styles are both the authoritative and the authoritarian. So there's a mixture of both.
Yeah.
So I was just kind of doing a lot more reflecting, like, man, what type of parent would I be too at the same time? So I think it just makes you think more, which I think goes back to like, man, being a parent could be stressful because you're balancing like, okay, I don't want to be overbearing and I want to make sure I give them space, but I also want to provide consequences. So like that's my perspective. That's why I'm like, man, having kids could be a lot. So I'm just like reflecting on all that stuff.
I'm gonna tell you, it ain't easy. And myself talking to my son last night, and he was like, yeah, me and my friends, we're gonna see if we can get a ride to Chicago to go to the St. Patrick's Day parade. And I was like, oh child, my son, black male child, is going to be downtown Chicago. He is 6'8", 6'9". He's gonna stand out. I said, Lord. And I'm thinking, well, do whatever you want to do. But finally I said, could you text me and make sure you get there okay? He's 20. He don't need to do any of that. But I sure was saying, please let me know you got there okay. But I have to let him have his own experiences. So it is tough. Thank you, Amiri. Who else? What y'all think? I don't have biological Diane. Diane, I'll call you Dion. I don't have biological children, but I have daughters from a past relationship. Wait, I don't have biological children, but I have daughters from a past relationship. I don't get that. I guess as a step parent, maybe. I don't know. I don't understand, but I got it. Okay. All right. And anybody else before I move on to theories?
I think I do agree with Mary that like you always think as a parent, like, am I doing it right? Am I breaking my children? Like, what are they going to talk about in therapy later? And what were the good things from your parents that you want to pass on? Because I think, I have different styles of parenting depending on which parent was implementing things at the time. So, and some worked and some didn't.
Yeah. And I guess, oh my gosh, think about that. Different styles of parenting. Y'all get together and you have children, and then you start figuring out, like, why would you do that weird stuff? Like, why would you do and say that? And then you have conflict there. So a lot of the stuff you need to talk about. Like, tell me about how your parents, I'll tell you about my parents. And it's a negotiated thing. I really do think that new parents should be able to have conversations with each other about the type of parenting they received. And then they together, ideally, have conversations about, okay, what bits and pieces from our childhood in terms of parenting we want to bring forward in this new generation of individuals we're going to raise together, and what bits and pieces we want to leave behind. You could also say, my parents did this, I don't want to do that at all. Have that conversation too, because you can remember like what didn't work for you. And I just think, like we were talking about before, the biggest thing is that there's no perfect anything. the best thing to do is to think about what you experience and to reflect on it, having a reflective quality, a reflective nature, being able to stop and think about experiences and the effect it had on you. That really is all there is, because ain't nothing going to be perfect. Pain, I was talking about this with Nuri Muhammad a few weeks ago in one of our Love and Money Lab. We were talking about how pain is inevitable. You're going to have some pain, but it depends on how you process it will dictate whether you suffer. So suffering is optional, or you're going to grow and learn. And I think nothing does more for young adulthood as you talk about growing pains. It happens in young adulthood. Growing pains. Oh my Lord. Okay. So let's move on. Theories. Okay, when I worked in Guyana, and everybody in Guyana, and I think it's a Caribbean thing, I call it theories, and they call it theories. So it's so funny. As a social work professor, I would have to say theories, and it was no three. Everything was one tree. It was just interesting, the language of the Caribbean. Tree instead of three, it was tree. And instead of math, it was math. How'd you do on your math? Anyway, I digress. But I miss Guyana. I kind of like being around the students there. They're really kind of funny. But theories, let's talk about theories. Erickson's psychosocial theories, in the spirit of Guyana, we'll say theories. Early adulthood, according to Erickson, is 21 to 40. Life expectancy currently is about 80. So according to him, this kind of happened from, I guess the first half is early. And then once you get to above 40, you're in this kind of middle adulthood stage. But according to Erickson, it's up to 40. I think in class we talked about maybe 30 something, but 40. With Erickson's crisis that people have during this time is intimacy versus isolation. Are you going to be comfortable forming and developing relationships outside of your family of origin? A lot of times that's what it is, because you're being more independent. Are you going to have this sort of phase where you are able to figure out who you are and how you interact with other people? Or are you going to isolate yourself? This is the crisis that people go through during this age, right? And intimacy is the ability to experience an open, supportive, tender relationship with another person. It could be a significant other, it could be friends, it could be all the different ways. It could be sports. A lot of people play sports. A lot of people do all sorts of things at this age. Are you able to develop friendships and meaningful relationships without fear of losing your own identity in the process? That's what intimacy is. It's joining and connecting with somebody, but still maintaining who you are. In order to do that, you have to be able to understand someone else's point of view. You have to be able to be confident in who and what you are. You have to be able to support and to talk about your judgment and talk about who you are. And you have to be able to listen to other people's experiences, although it's different from yours. And then you have to feel comfortable sharing your own personal experiences. So that is what intimacy means. Isolation, on the other hand, is on the other continuum, right? Isolation is when it's social bonds with people And you want to create social bonds with individuals, but you don't feel comfortable connecting. You don't feel like you have a sense of belonging with anybody. Isolation means that you're not connecting with people because you're afraid. You're afraid of a deep level of connection, really asking people for help, really, letting people know and see who and what you are. And that's what isolation, and according to research, isolation at this age, these are very lonely people, and it can cause a lot of psychological distress. Um, it's like, in order to adjust in terms of intimacy, it for people who go in this isolation continuum, who are more on the isolated side, it's just too overwhelming for them. They say, I'm not able to connect. I don't want anybody to be with. Every time I even think about a relationship with someone else, I get overwhelmed. And they have a very difficult time. And a lot of these people, y'all seen people who stay at home and play video games all day? Or a lot of men do this, they don't really connect with actual people. They just on the computer all day, or women who just are too afraid to go out and explore, and they're scared, they just in the house, homebodies, and they feel this way. This is what you start to think about, that why is this so overwhelming? And so they tend to isolate themselves. And it's required, this intimacy, to achieve this virtue of love. And love means empathetic awareness of other people. The crisis is to feel alienated, disconnected, alone, and you have a lot of fear. So fear keeps you from connecting with others. Fear that you're giving yourself through a significant other, committed relationship, you lose your sense of identity. That's what Erickson says is going on with y'all in this group, y'all folks in this group. Erickson, love me some Erickson. Okay. Levinson comes around. Oh wait, I want to say one more. Erickson, what I want to know what y'all think. What are the obstacles based on what we've talked about so far? What are the obstacles to intimacy that people have to intimacy during this age? What do y'all think are the obstacles? I forgot to ask y'all that. Why is it so hard for some people? Anybody in the chat? Why is it so hard for some people? Isolation is good. Isolation is good for some people. Why is it hard? What do y'all think? What are some of the obstacles based on what we've talked about so far? What are some of the obstacles that leads to isolation?
I would say like one of the current obstacles with like this stage of life is cell phones. Like everybody is so glued to their phone, they can't get out of their phone. They cannot have a normal conversation with someone without looking at their phone for like 2 seconds. And I feel like this is a really big problem in this stage, because it's hard to make connections, because nobody knows how to have a full-length conversation anymore. We only really know how to text in the small little lingo and the small conversations you have through your phone. And that, I feel like that's overall the problem, is just how glued to our phones and how glued we are to social media, and like that gratification from others online, it's like it ceases anything like in real life, basically.
That's not real intimacy. These are not people that you know. Really, I got 500 friends on Facebook. They're not really my friends. What do you mean? We're giving words like friends and hearts on social media, on Instagram. We hearted everything. But that don't mean I really love you. I mean, I don't even know who these people are. It's really something. And I'm on social media because that's how I run my business. But it's so interesting how people get so caught up into that. It's not real connection with actual individuals. Like, your life needs to be just as fabulous in real time than it is in just this virtual world. I mean, to call it Facebook, you're not facing anybody really. It's all digital. Oh my God, Journey. That is such a wonderful point. It is moving us.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off
Yes.
of what both y'all were saying. So, like with social media, I've had people because, like you said, when people are Facebook friends with you, they feel like they know you. And then I've had people say like, "Oh, I was friends with this person," and I'm like, "No, like you don't know anything about me. You just follow me on social media." So it is like people mix up the two because you're social media friends, but yet we don't have a face-to-face interaction outside of that. So technically, we're not really friends.
No, we are not. It's really interesting. It's an interesting life to live. You live your whole life online. Where's your real life? And to me, this is being, the real life are the people you interact with physically. There's no substitute for physical. How do you give affection online? Like, I'm gonna send you a virtual hug. I don't know if that's the same as a real one. I've sent people virtual hugs. I don't know. Yes.
I'm a firm believer in the ventricle to ventricle hug, so it will not work.
What's a ventricle hug? The face to face on your body?
Yes, when it's like full compression,
yes,
heart to heart hug.
It's really something to, like my family of origin, they're huggy people. Like when you go into like a family event, you're giving everybody in the room a hug, and it's so funny. And it's not in a creepy way or anything, but people do that. And I had my friend come with me, and like they didn't even know her, but they were like, baby. And she had to give everybody a hug. And she was like, I feel so full. She left my house like, I had never been hugged like that before. That was so great. And they were all ventricle hugs. They were like, bring it in. They were like giving people hugs. And it was really, how she felt, because her family of origin didn't do that. That's a good one. Any other thoughts? Obstacles? Video games, technology, feeling like you're less than. That's one. Inferiority is another. All right. Oh, wait. We got somebody in the chat. Dion Leeway. Thank you. He said that when he wanted to play sports, gathered enough fellas in the neighborhood to play whatever. Yeah, we didn't have organized. When I was growing up, I didn't have no organized sports. Like my mama wasn't signing me up. She wasn't taking me to soccer practice and dance practice. We didn't have dance group. I mean, dance, like my daughter is at dance right now. We didn't have dance with an actual dance teacher, making sure everybody got along. It was like whoever's in the neighborhood, we just crank some music on, and then we all practice pop locking. That was it. That was dance class. And then soccer, we just play, maybe a little soccer, but jump rope and throwing the football back and forth. Like that's the stuff. It was no organized sports when I was growing. Things were different back then. But I spent so much time as a child with no cell phone, just running out like a feral animal in the streets. Come back and my hair be all frozen up, stuck in the air like this. I'd be like, they'd be like, what happened to you? I don't know. I was out playing, having fun. The street lights came on, then I'd come in. So I spent a lot of time with my friends, and that is not the way it is now. Anyway. Okay. Levinson says, young adulthood is 17 to 33. How he came up with 17, I don't know how he came up with 17. So Levinson says his theory of life structure, He says we are all influenced by two things: our internal desires and what society expects of us. So that's the basis of what Levinson talks about. You know, this novice phase of adulthood, we have sort of like an individual internal desire, but we also have societal expectations, right? You are expected to do certain things. And he thinks that, of course, decisions about relationships, careers, your belief system, that making these decisions is a key transitional period, right? What are your goals in life? And this your personality is continuing to develop as you in conjunction with figuring out who you are in terms of relationships. Now, a lot of times people say, you know what? And it's been happening early on, but there are people who are like, you know what? I don't know if I like men or if I like women. They're trying to form their identity and they're making decisions because it's an internal society is expecting me, because we live in a very heterogeneous society. American society is very white, it's very male, it's very patriarchal, and it is very hetero. These are the norms of society. So this is what is pressed upon us, to adhere to white dominant culture. That's American culture, the WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant sort of work ethic and culture. That's what we are. And if anyone's watched Killers of the Flower Moon, you see Native American culture is totally different from traditional American culture, right? Totally different, because I don't know if people understood this, but in Native American culture, typically, when you accumulate things, you're not looked up to when you accumulate things. You're honored when you're able to give things away. So in Native American culture, you give things away, and that's what makes you honorable. But in typical American culture, it's nothing but greed. Like your worth and your ability is based on how much you can get from other people and gather. Hence the problem with that movie that you will see demonstrated in that movie, Killers of the Flower Moon. That movie, I would like to show it to students in the master's program, but it is 3.5 hours long, and it took me a whole month to get through it. So I would not put that on anybody, but I said it's a movie I highly recommend. So yeah, so you have these external pressures and internal pressures. He talks about work domains, um, a lot of who and what you are depends on the type of family you come from. We talked about that, where you are geographically, all of these things. But what he is saying is that there's this structure where you're navigating internal and external demands. You're continuing out on your own. You're trying to figure out relationships and career. You're trying to come to terms with this and figure out your own belief systems. And he's saying it takes you minimum 15 years to figure it out. You ain't really going to be a stable adult, and it's going to take 15 years to do it. And I would have to agree with that. What do y'all think? 15 years? He's saying, Levinson is saying, that beginning in early adulthood, there's these seasons in your life that you have to come to terms with. All of these aspects in your life, you're making all of these critical decisions, 17 to 33, critical decisions that you're making that can affect you for the rest of your life. You're building stable structures. So you're getting a job, you're contributing to 401k, you're making these decisions in terms of your life. You're trying to figure out exploring who to date, what type of mate you want to have. You got 15 years here in which you don't really know what the hell is going on. And It hasn't, the decisions you make during this time, choices you make during this time sets the tone for the rest of your life. Those 15 years that it takes, according to him, to construct your nice, stable life is dependent on the decisions that you make. And he says, this will, after 15 years, you will then be able to understand your place in the world. And this is going to take thoughtful consideration of your life's path. What do y'all think? Is Levinson onto something, or does he not know what the hell he's talking about?
I think it sounds pretty accurate to me.
Yeah. Say more about that, considering you're out of it.
Sorry. I think I like that it's the novice phase of adulthood, that it's like you're practicing. It's the intro. You're not expected to really have it all down. And it does take, I like the 15 years to construct a stable life structure. Because it still feels very tenuous the whole time before that.
Yeah, because I mean, you want to be on your own, but you still need your parents to help you. You know, think about that conversation I had with my son. He's 20, and he was like, should I do this or should I do that? You know, he's making all of these decisions. He's like, I don't know. In the back of my mind, I'm like, dang, didn't I parent him correctly? He should be able to figure it out. But I guess not. He does need some guidance. Oh, and by the way, he did ask me for some money. He did ask to use my car. Oh, I want to go to Chicago. Can I use your car? I said, oh, no, you cannot to use my car to go to Chicago. You're going to have to figure, I encourage you to go to Chicago to the St. Patrick's Day parade, but you ain't going in my car. Oh, no. Oh, no. But good luck to you. Uh-huh.
Like, even if you do have kids in that phase, like, your parents are still helping you parent, and like, that's who you are reaching out to for advice. And then afterwards, you kind of, like, depending on how old your parents are, you can start becoming their caretakers a little bit.
Yeah.
Or they need you more. You become the tech help. And
yeah, they do help me with tech. Yeah, I will say that. I am kind of technologically kind of it's a work in progress. I'm happy I got us on StreamYard today, and everything has been moving smoothly, because it don't always move smoothly. Yeah, it's something. And I have money to give him, but I have to sort of think about it in terms of, like, am I really helping him? Like, there's consequences, you know, to his behavior too. I'm still parenting him. And whatever decisions he makes, I'm talking to him about the consequences. So yeah, he's got to figure out what to major in college. He has figured it out. He's had to adjust a little bit. And, you know, so, you know, he's at a point where he needs to start really thinking about his future. Very good. Very good. Okay, let's move on to what Arnett. I like Arnett. Arnett is saying, okay, there is this between stage where you're an adolescent, and, like, as we talked, you're relying on your parents, and adults' long-term commitments in love and work. So he's saying that we're balancing these things, that we are moving away from adolescence, from our parents, and we're entering into a world. But one thing Arnett brings out, and I think that's true, is that we have within us a mental representation of our attachment figures. So I may not be with my child as he ventures off. He's a young adult as he ventures off, but I'm certain my voice is in his head. Hopefully I've parented him enough where he can make decisions, and he might want to do one thing, but then he's like, okay, I do remember my mom saying this. And then he's got to decide for himself what is it he's going to do? So I have to rest on the hope and cross my fingers and hope that his attachment figure, I've given him the right guidance. So you have a representation of your parents that carries with you. Y'all know, have y'all taken object relations? No, you haven't taken that class. There's a class called theories that specifically looks at theories, and they talk about object relations. So it happens here in adulthood where you're being independent and you have a representation of your parent in you. And research has found that, yes, there is, your adult parents, once you leave the house, and you can tell me what you think, once you leave the house, research says that you start to have a greater appreciation of your parents. That even if adolescence was a little rough and tenuous, the moment you leave the house and you start venturing off on your own, you start calling home. Who was that? Mary talked about that. You start calling home and asking your parents for things and asking them for guidance, because you start to appreciate your parents and all of their sacrifices, because now you're starting to understand what all it takes to be an adult. And you're starting to realize, oh Lord, my parents had to go through this. I so appreciate them much more. And what happens is that there's a mutual respect between parents and children, that kind of starts during this time that wasn't there before. You're just a snotty-nosed little kid sometimes. But when you get older and you start taking on this emerging adulthood, Arnett is saying, wait, your parents become more of a mentor. What do y'all think? Do you start calling home more? You're like, I can't wait to get out of this house. I ain't talking to none of y'all. And then as soon as you leave, you're like, hey, mom, what do I do? Hey, dad, what do I do? You buy a house. Wait, Emily, you talked about buying a house. You be calling your mama saying, how do I do this? What do y'all think?
I can agree with that. I wasn't one that wanted to like hurry up and rush away from home. So I still like being close to my parents. But I do agree with the statement that you said, like you kind of just you do appreciate them. I literally just had my 21-year-old sister say that to me. She said, I appreciate, what our parents did for us. They weren't as strict, but they had boundaries. But now she sees the sacrifices now that she's away at college, to see like them being like having to pay for her dorm and stuff like that. Like she sees what goes into that. Where it's like, man, I really appreciate, even so she also told me like she appreciates how we were raised compared to seeing other children, at her college. And she's just like, I really appreciate how we were raised as girls, growing up and then being out in the world, like, having that self-respect and having morals, having boundaries and things like that. So that is a true statement.
Yeah, you start looking at some of these other families. You're like, I thought my family was all messed up. They ain't nothing compared to what these people are going through. I remember like going to college, and there were actually mothers who, when their child turned 18, they took out a credit card in their child's name and just like ran up the credit card bill. Your child ain't even really started, but they took the credit card in their child's name and bought furniture. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe parents would do. I'm like, why would parents do that to the child? They're starting them off with bad credit already. As soon as they turn 18, they got bad credit. I could not understand what was happening there. Like, why were they doing this? So yeah, I mean, economic roles. Please. Yeah, so you're trying out new experiences related to love, work, financial responsibilities. You want to go upward. You want to go upward. All of us who leave home, you want to do better and be better than what your parents gave you. You're like, you know what? I went through these things and I want to be able to go out and achieve more than what, my parents gave me, so that I could do more for my children than my parents did to me. There's always this desire to want to do better and be better. You are making independent responsibility for decision making and finances. Finances. This is the first time, according to Arnett, where you're making your own financial decisions, independent of your parents, right? So if you're a student, you're like, oh, how much student loans do I take out? How much do I put on credit card? You're budgeting, rent and groceries. That's the first time that you're doing some of these things. Also, do you have a sense of self-sufficiency? All of the independent decision making that you're doing, you're taking on responsibilities and actions, and you're achieving a degree of financial independence at this time too. Yes, you do need your parents, but you also want to do some things on your own. But I want to ask y'all what y'all think about this one. Why is Arnett saying this? Arnett says marriage has not retained its high status as a critical benchmark of adults. What do y'all think? Because I don't talk about it here, but in a lot of African-based, like Africa, like the continent Africa-based cultures, you are not considered an adult unless you get married. Like you're still a child, and no matter how old you are. They believe in rites of passage, and marriage is a rite of passage, the only thing that puts you into adulthood. That's African-based thinking. But I want to know what y'all think. Is marriage, do you think you need to be married in order to be an adult?
No, not anymore. But I know that even my mom, she had a full-time job, graduated college, but it was the expectation of her parents that she lived at home until she got married, because the only reason a single woman would live outside the home is to do immoral things. That was what my grandma told her.
Your grandma said that. Oh Lord. Your grandma was like, that's so old school.
Yeah, I mean, and even then, like, my mom couldn't get her own credit card. She couldn't get her own loan, anything like that, because it wasn't the law yet that a single female could do it without a male cosigner. So before, you previously had to be married to be able to be at all somewhat financially independent from your parents.
Yeah, I mean, can you believe, I like Downton Abbey. Y'all watch Downton Abbey? I watched Downton Abbey, and I was like, these people are so focused on getting married. And then I thought about it. I was like, they only get inheritance from their father if the inheritance has to go to their husbands. Women did not receive an inheritance. So of course they're like focused on who do I marry. They're so fixated on who am I going to marry, because they ain't gonna get no money until they get a husband and children. Yeah, so we have evolved. We have changed as a society, and change is just normal. It's neither good or bad. And I'm gonna tell you something, we're never going back. Whether you want to go back to more traditional styles of, there's some people there, believe it or not, Emily, there are people who think we need to go back to a lot of those things. I don't have an opinion for or against. I just think that, let's just face it, we're never going back to that, and you have to be okay with that. Like, we have to adjust. Modern times, adjust to the times. Don't be, you know how old people look when they're shaking their fist in the air? Oh, I can't believe modern families are disastrous. Well, no, they're not. Actually, we're a lot safer, a lot kinder, a lot nicer to each other than we've ever been in the past. So, yeah, you can tell me your opinion, but you ain't entitled to the facts. And the facts are this: we're safer now as society is safer than it's ever been. Ever been. Anybody else? Marriage. Let's see, people in the chat. I said the participation award theory was stupid. Oh, giving people participation awards. They don't do that anymore, thankfully. That's not done anymore. Okay. Okay, so there are 5 characteristics of adulthood. Emerging adulthood. This is Arnett. Arnett goes into depth and says, listen, let me explain what I mean. There's 5 characteristics of emerging adults. And part of it is exploring your identity. I think we talked about that. Personal and professional roles. And this is where you're figuring out what fits for you, what type of job you want to do, what type of person you want to eventually date. That has a lot of figuring these things out. What type of lifestyle you want to live. I want to live a good lifestyle, but how you going to get there and who's going to pay for it, right? Lifestyle. So, that's part of what Arnett is saying, that, this is one of the characteristics of emerging into as an adult. He calls it emerging, right? Instability. Just know that instability is normal. And he's saying, look, inherently, when you are an emerging adult, inherent in this space where we can get to this 15 years of solidification, it's inherent that you're going to change jobs. You're going to date somebody and be like, ooh, I would never date a man like that again. Let me find this kind of, I don't want that kind of man again. You're figuring out who and what you want to be, who you want to date. You're thinking about a job you had that was like, no, I don't want that kind of job. I want this kind of job. You're also going back and getting an education. You're like, you know what? There was in my master's program back in the late 90s, I was getting my master's degree in social work. There were people there who were in this emerging adult who were like, I was a lawyer for 5 years. I can't believe it. Went to law school, became a lawyer for 5 years. Then they turned around and said, I do not want to practice law. I want to now be a social worker. It was like, I want to be a therapist. So career changes happens in this time. Like, this is not what I want to do. So it can be seen as very unstable. Instability is inherent. It's normal to be not completely stable. That's just what it is. We are fine-tuning our arrangements. Living arrangements change, right? And during the stage, you are very self-focused. You're like, what can I do? You ain't ready to mentor nobody, right? You're developing yourself. You're independent from your parents and you're trying to figure out what's going on. And you can never go home again. I don't think you can ever go home again. Like, when I left home to go to college, I mean, I didn't grow up in a terrible childhood. I had a pretty decent childhood, but I was ready to get out of there. And when I left home to go to college, I was like, I don't know how y'all felt, but like Christmas break in between the semesters, like I was kind of like, all right, I'm ready to go back to my dorm. Hey, y'all. I'm still teaching. I'm finishing up soon, though. How did it go? I'm live on YouTube, too. I am kind of warm. And I had drank out of this water. It's okay. I'm managing.
Tell YouTube I say hi.
Boy says hi. He just finished a speech. Anyway, so let's get through. Okay, so what was I talking about? Oh, yeah. So Christmas break, I'll be home for Christmas break. And I remember as soon as New Year's hit, I was like, oh, I can't wait to go back. I love my mama. I love my daddy. I love everybody. But I was ready to go back to my independent life because then I was able to have a thing. What are you doing? You were taking a picture of me?
Yeah, my wife. I just,
This,
catch random moments.
he snaps pictures.
And my other cousin.
I should have took. You know what? I meant to take a picture with you when you were down.
Selfie. Okay, hold on. Selfie. And James, me and you now. Selfie. There we go. You got to capture the little moments.
Capture the moments.
Yeah, this picture remind me of our trip to Cincinnati.
I know. This is so great. Wait, I got 1, 2, 3. I got like 4 or 5 slides left, and I'll be done. I'll find you. Where you going?
We'll be down at the lower level. Go all the way down the steps.
Oh, lower. Okay, I got it. All right. So, so you're focused on yourself. I wasn't focused on nobody else. I was trying to develop myself and have my own independence, and I was ready. Sorry for the interruption. Oh, look at this. This talks about how often people change. Look at how much people change. Rate of residential change by age. Why does the rate peak at emerging adulthood? Look at the rate per 1,000. Look how that rate goes up. By the time you're 25, like you're moving. It's like, don't write your address in permanent ink. I used to have an address book. I don't know if anybody has address books, but I would be like, I cannot write this person's. Anybody who's in this age range, don't put permanent ink, put a pencil, because they're going to be moving. And then it kind of stabilizes as you get older, right? Not my opinion. This is data. This is evidence-based stuff. Oh, I'll tell Boy she said hello. All right. So, okay. Another emerging characteristic in early adulthood is feeling in between. Journey, do you feel in between? Do you feel you have reached adulthood? In some ways, yes, some ways, no. Are you in between?
Most definitely. Definitely in between.
You like, this is a very unique quality to early adulthood. I feel like an adult sometimes, but then sometimes I do not feel like an adult. I can't. I need help. But guess what? There's all sorts of possibilities. Unparalleled sense of options. I think emerging early adulthood is the most optimistic time. Positivity, your outlook towards the future. There's a vast sense of opportunities always. What are you going to do? Lots of optimism during this time. The possibilities are endless, it feels like. And I think it's great. I think it's a lot of anxiety, it's a lot of worry. You don't have the self-confidence, it's still developing. You're emerging with your career. You're trying to figure out who to date, who not to date. You're trying to figure out, and if you have children during this time, you're trying to figure out all these things about how to care for them, all of the financial burdens and responsibilities that you got to now take on your own because you have to be independent in order to do that. It is, I don't know how I got through it, but I did get through this. Do you feel you have reached adulthood? Emily, do you feel like you've reached adulthood? Because we're not emerging.
Yes, I do.
You do?
I think now I do.
Now you feel like you're an adult. Okay, so me and you, we're in this last group, 36 to 55. That's our group. And okay, some people say no, 10%, less than 10% say no here. So yeah, so you're in with this group. Yes, with the 90%. Yeah, I've reached adulthood. I think I've reached adulthood too. I don't need my parents for anything. Okay, I think Journey, you're down here. So yeah, so you're in with this. You're kind of like not quite yet. How about you, Mary? Do you feel like you've reached adulthood?
I would say closer to yes.
Okay.
Even though sometimes no.
Okay. Yes, no. Yes and no. Look at the yes and no people. It's high, but that shrinks down. Yes and no. 12 to 17 say yes and no. Wow. This is what Arnett points to. Okay. Physical functioning. Yes. Let me just say, y'all, your physical functioning, believe it or not, actually has a big impact on your ability to transition through stages. Drugs and alcohol. Think about that. Drugs and alcohol, first of all, you're making these critical decisions, but if you're using drugs and alcohol, you are not going to be able to make good decisions with your finances. Your money is being tied to your substance abuse issue? How are you going to achieve academically? How are you going to get skills? I don't know how. I know people who are in this early adulthood and they smoke and get high every day. I don't know how the hell they are able to function. And you know what? Now that I think about them, they are not functioning really well. Like, stop asking me for stuff. Like, I'll be more apt to contribute to somebody who is doing pro-social behaviors. Like, why, if you're smoking and getting high every day, like, I don't want to help you. You know what I mean? Like, you need to get your act together. And I think it delays people. The drugs and alcohol, like, yeah, drugs and alcohol is fun. It's not good for your health. It's not good for your mental health. In the moment, it might be fun. But the thing is that I can't raise children, have a husband, have work responsibilities, and also do drugs and alcohol at the same time. I just can't I'm not a good functioning addict. So, I mean, it just doesn't work with my lifestyle. Like, I want to exercise and eat right and do all these things. It just doesn't go well for me. So it's really interesting. If you're involved in some of these things, I don't know how can you really live anything? How can you're limiting yourself in terms of your possibilities. I don't know what's going on with this breast cancer for women. I was kind of saddened to see that it's increased ages 20 to 39. I can't imagine having health concerns, even diabetes, type 1 diabetes. That's not even your fault. Type 1 diabetes, my understanding, is genetic, right? These health concerns, those are barriers to achieving some of these developmental milestones. You're managing a chronic illness. If you're doing that, it necessitates a higher level of personal responsibility for your healthcare and literacy and all of these things. You need to understand what's going on with you. And, how are you going to find a potential partner when you're battling cancer? I mean, just think about that. It can kind of get in the way with some of these things. Okay. I think that, class is almost over. Wait, let me see. Where am I? Okay. Intimacy. Developing some sort of intimacy is going to take your interdependence. To develop true intimacy, you have to rely on each other, share responsibilities. Let's see what else. Interdependence means you're in each other's life, and you don't, it's not dependent, there's an interdependency, like how you move. To develop interdependency, you have to kind of move away from just being self-focused to being other focused, but at the same time maintaining your own sense of identity. And this is how you form deep connections. Interdependence is how you form a deep connection with somebody. And in order to do that, you're going to have to disclose. You're going to have to be able to share your personal thoughts and feelings and experiences. And this is how you foster healthy relationships and an understanding. And affection is so important at this age. Your emotional bonds. This is how you cement relationships. You're loving, you're caring to each other. These are the 3 components of intimacy, right? And of course, there's all different forms of intimacy. Maybe by the time Amari graduates, we'll do a whole workshop on intimacy, because that's one thing that I think a lot of people struggle with, even in marriages, is, how much do you rely on your partner for cognitive intellectual intimacy, like sharing your ideas and having stimulating conversations and debating topics. This intellectual intimacy, is it just with your partner? You can have that with anybody, some of your friends, right? How do you negotiate that in relationships? Emotional intimacy, you're exchanging deep feelings. Of course, sexual intimacy. There are people who are like, girl, Angie, there are people who are like, we should have an open marriage and bring all these people in. And it's all this sort of, yes, it's starting to be a trend now. I'm starting to see it with a lot of y'all. There's a show called, y'all gotta watch it. It's called Marriage Therapy. That's the name of the show. It's on what show? It's on Showtime. If y'all got Showtime, check it out. It's called Marriage Therapy. And like the first couple, the latest season, season 3, they talk like pretty, you'd be so surprised. Like most of the younger generation, generational thing, they're like, I just want an open marriage and I like polygamy and all these things that they're talking about. But on paper, it makes sense. But in practice, I've never seen it work in practice. It could just be because of my practice. But I have had people have engaged in polygamy in my work, but it'll never work. First of all, being in a relationship with one person is tough enough.
Right.
Being trying to navigate that with other people, it's like more problems. So it takes a special kind of person.
Position. Oh yeah, a certain type of person. They have those shows too, the Sister Wives.
Sister Wives is so good. I know that kind of stuff, but I'm like, who wants to be number 2? Do you want to be number 2?
No, I'm number 1. I'm the queen bee.
I'm the one and only.
Right.
Girl, be playing around with that kind of stuff. But I don't know how people do it. And it's hard. It's complicated. But anyway, these are things you think about in developing a relationship. Spiritual. I'm here with my cousin Angela. She's my cousin. And she is like, her husband is a pastor. So, that's a lot to be married to a pastor. This is the first lady over here. She is, I told her she got to get her church hat. You got to put your church hat on and sit in the front. And you got to go like this. You got to sit in the front, be first lady. But spiritual connection with someone else. And I see it between the two of y'all.
Really?
Yeah, y'all got it. Y'all got the same values, purpose in life. And y'all been together forever. So that's it. There ain't no more intimacy than time. I don't know. Do we believe in soulmates? Definitely in westernized society, we think soulmates are going to happen. And I do want to talk about, this is important. Okay, let me tell you about this. Y'all, guess what? Guess what the number one, I don't want y'all to see this. I'm going to take it off the screen. Guess what the number one factor on whether you have a healthy relationship with another person is? This particular person in your life lays the groundwork for how you in early adulthood will perceive and engage in close connections in later life. Who's that person?
Your mom.
Your mama. This is not my opinion. There was a study conducted with college students, but it was college students. But there have been other replicated studies that having a relationship with your mother, not your dad, not anybody else, with your mother is a model of as a respectful, loving interaction provided by maternal relationship. And that is what teaches you valuable relational skills early on. And it's not just the relationship with your mother, it's the relationship with your mother during your adolescent years.
Why do you think that is? Right.
I don't know why y'all think it is. Why y'all think it's why the mama during adolescence?
Maybe because of nurturing.
I think they have a lot of influence over how you see yourself, and as you're growing into your own person, if they value who you've become and if they appreciate it and like it, because they were the person who loved you unconditionally from the beginning. So if when you're growing up and becoming more independent, if they still feel connected to you or you feel connected to them, then it's like very reassuring.
Yeah, I think what the study concluded was that your relationship with your mother is seen as a pathway toward fulfilling intimacy in young adulthood. That it does give you Who's calling me? Anyway, it does give you that sense of a secure attachment style. I think that everything is put on the mama. Why is everything put on the mama? Why can't the daddy do something?
The women are supposed to are seen. You're the backbone. You're strong. You're the.
What the heck is this? Don't be in therapy blaming everything on one person. But the data says you're blamed for everything. Like, they ain't fair. Not fair. The burden we have as mothers. And I think, like, if that's the case, then why don't you give me some maternity leave when I leave? I had a baby working as a college professor. Come on, that's the highest level of education anybody could get. How many days? How much time do you think I got off with paid leave? 0. I don't have any paid time. I'm a contract person. I don't get no sick days. I don't get no PTO. You just do this job, or
pay for what you do,
or you lose your job. Do this or you lose your job. I do have benefits, but I don't have any like paid time off. I have nothing like that. Like, it was tough having a baby. And it's not just my university, it's every university in America. Nobody gives moms anything. But they come out with studies like the relationship and nurturing supportive relationship with your mama is developing and doing all this stuff. But I mean, we don't even live in a society that even supports all of that. Oh, it just drives me crazy. So you're blaming us for everything in a sense, but then you don't give us nothing. Let me move on. Let me stop. I don't know. I just think it's not fair. I don't want to take the blame for my children messing up. Lord, romantic love.
That's the first place they look when kids
They do
wrong, or
they look at
turn
the
out to
mama.
be like serial killers or whatever.
Y'all don't know, Miss Angie over here, she's a social worker too. She works for DCFS, but not the Illinois one, the Kentucky one. In Kentucky. I mean, I don't know, where am I? Am I in Kentucky or Ohio? I'm in Ohio/Kentucky. But she's the big time practicing social worker over here. What do y'all think about arranged marriages? I think, like, I talked to my 20-year-old, and I actually have a child in this emerging adulthood. He was saying, I said, love at first sight. Somebody will get your qualifications, figure out what you want, and then all you have to do is just show up and marry somebody. And you know what he said? Yeah. He was like, "Oh, that'd be so nice, because then I don't have to worry about finding nobody." And I was like,
"Really?"
I said,
there's a show called Love Is Blind.
And Love Is Blind. That show is crazy. That show. I watched this latest season. It's a little cringy. That show was kind of cringy to me, but that's just kind of something. Like, he was like, whew. I was like, well, maybe I can arrange a marriage for him, find some woman, because I mean, it's cultural. We have this sense that we're supposed to fall in love and be attracted to somebody and then marry them. But arranged marriage is like, no, you fall in love later. The passion and stuff is later on. Most people do cohabitate before. Did you cohabitate before you got married?
No.
You did it the right way.
I wouldn't say that.
Your mom would be proud of you. I cohabitated. I did. Oh, well, it's a sign of the times for me. Okay. Oh my God, there's 2 more slides. Let's go through this. This makes sense. All of these things have to happen in intimate relationships. You have to negotiate expectations. I don't know why people don't do this before they get married. Most people don't. You probably didn't. You got married all quick.
I did.
Did y'all have a conversation about expectations?
We actually went to marital counseling about our pastor.
Oh, yeah. I think pastors do a wonder. By the way, pastors are not therapists.
Right.
Do they know they're not therapists?
Well, ours here, he lets it know. If you got mental issues, I'm not a therapist. And he gives them
Mhm.
places to go.
That's
They be trying
nice.
to be up there.
Because some of these pastors be like giving terrible
Good
advice to
advice.
people. Like,
Mhm.
who told you what? Okay. So I think pastors are really good at helping couples before they get married negotiate these expectations,
Right.
negotiating the roles and responsibilities, how to make compromise. Like, they're good at that kind of stuff, but sometimes you need a professional to kind of help you sort out things when it just becomes very destructive and toxic. And who the F did I marry? Did you see that girl on
No.
TikTok?
No, I've been hearing about it, but I haven't seen it.
Girl, watch it. Girl, come on, could you like that kind of stuff?
I do.
Oh my God. I started watching it with my daughter and I binged on that thing.
Really?
Yes, I did a video on it. Did any of y'all see that? Who the F did I marry? I was on there like, what did she do? Like, why would she do that? Not that I was blaming her, but she didn't do any of these things. She didn't talk about negotiating roles. These tasks involved in fostering intimate relationships were missing. And when he did engage in any of these things, he was just lying to her anyway, telling her what she wanted to hear. It was really a sad story. But these are all of
She missed all the red flags.
she openly missed the red. I mean, she was like, okay, this is a red flag, and I missed it. I know, I knew it was a red flag, and I went on anyway. Okay, last slide, y'all. Thank you for bearing with me. Parenthood. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to negotiate these roles and responsibilities, and you have to adapt. And that's a big thing in this age group. And Amari talked about she's got a co-parent situation. She's got co-parents. She's got a stepchild, and you have to be able to you got to bring yet another person, and it can happen. It can be beautiful and healthy, but it's tenuous. It's like we're good now, but tomorrow, who knows what's going on? So you have to be able to negotiate that. And I think that when you can get through some of these things, having a child, if it's worked through, can actually deepen your intimacy and connection with your spouse, with your significant other, with your family members. It's another opportunity for you to call your mama, since it's all on the mama. Call your mama and talk to your mom about stuff. And, I didn't have friends when I first worked at St. Francis and I moved to Shorewood. I didn't have any friends. But then when my kids went to school, all my friends just became the parents to my children's friends. And that was my friendship group, So it did help to shape and living in the suburbs, I think helped because it was so safe. My neighborhood was safe. Girl, kids just be out.
Yeah.
I don't worry about where they are because it's a safe it's a bedroom community. There's not even any businesses there. Our taxes is high. But if we had businesses there, that brings in a different element and the taxes would be lower, but there'll be more issues. They wanted to build a truck stop, but the people in the neighborhood, yes, a truck stop, right? And then they were like, oh, hell no. Because, prostitution and all that stuff. So I like being in a community of people who kind of understand parenting, schoolwork, community that really put children first. Not only. They don't put children only. They put children first. I like that. Suburbs is a great place to raise children. I think that living in the city, and I had my first child, and I'm walking down in the stroller, and I'm in Chicago. I'm in Hyde Park, Chicago, and I'm looking over my shoulder, and there's this pit bull. They're fighting pit bulls. I was like, ew. And then I turn around, there's shooting going on over here. And I was like, ew. I was like, I can't do city stuff with a child. So it made me sort of change. All right, that's it. Y'all are good. Okay, I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody in YouTube. Thank you for sticking with me for an hour and 40 minutes. Didn't think it'd take this long to get through all of this, but it did. Thank you, oh Lord, I'm gonna mess up your name, but I love that you're here with us. I'll be back next week. Next time I lecture. Bye-bye. See you all. Let me end.